Okay, everyone, I think we can go ahead and jump in. Also, welcome to the 4th Annual Native Plant Symposium. My name is Jessica McCauley with the Prince William Soil and Water Conservation District, and I will be moderating this presentation today. I'm excited to introduce Nancy Berlin, who will be presenting Container Gardening with Natives. In this presentation, you'll learn how to grow your own garden in containers on a patio or a deck. When Nancy is not working in her garden, she enjoys her work with the Virginia Cooperative Extension. Since 2007, she has served as the Natural Resource Specialist and Coordinator of the Master Gardener Program, serving Prince William County, Manassas City, and Manassas Park. She studied natural resources at Virginia Tech's graduate program. The Prince William Master Gardener Program has over 200 active, highly trained volunteers who serve as environmental educators, teaching our community sustainable landscaping, savvy lawn care, effective and research-based pest management as a last alternative, as well as wildlife and water quality programs. Staff and volunteers in the Master Gardener Program have been involved in the launching of many community gardens and other collaborative projects. At the end of the presentation, we will have a 10-minute Q&A in the chat box. You can type your questions there at any time, and I will relay them to Nancy, and she will answer them at the end. So here is Nancy Berlin presenting Container Gardening with Natives.
Thanks, Jess. It's good to have you. This is the first time I have taught this to this larger group, and I'm really excited to do so. I want to encourage you, there's a lot of information in here. I want to encourage you to later go back and look at the recording, especially for the plant combinations. There's just a lot to take in. So just sit back and enjoy it for now, and then plan on taking notes when you can watch it at your own pace. So let's get started. So I don't think we probably need to define this, but for this presentation, I've chosen things that are local just to Northern Virginia. So Plant Nova Natives is a good resource for that. Ursanga's compendium that you heard mentioned is an excellent resource now to have. The exception is I threw in purple coneflower Echinacea purpurea because it is ubiquitous. I think it does serve a niche in my yard. So sources for local ecotype plants, again, can be found at the Plant Nova Natives website or the Ursanga compendium. Plus, there are native plant vendors, and Plant Nova Natives lists those. There's information in this presentation on cultivars, but for the most part, I'm going to be dealing with straight species, with the exception of a few. But we'll talk about cultivars on a couple slides. I've used exclusively the Latin names. Occasionally, I'll voice the common name. Lots of plants share the same common name, but if we're going to be talking about native plants, I want to make sure that you're getting the right plant when you go to a garden center or a vendor. And so that's another reason to watch this later, to make sure that you've gotten the right information. Okay, so inside me, there are two wolves, and one can remember many Latin binomials, but I can't remember why I went into the kitchen a few minutes ago. So I just want to encourage you, Latin is not a spoken language, so make an attempt at it. Nobody's going to laugh at you, or just laugh at yourself. There are about 4 terms in here that I have trouble saying, so if I stumble over them, you're in good company, okay? So you want to plan even for container gardening for, nectar flow, cover for insects, scattered bloom time. This is a small chart, so I don't want you to try to read it here, but for a closer look, you can Google Plant Nova Natives bloom time table and see this. And it shows you, what has a long period of bloom time and what has a shorter one and when that occurs. I'll give you some combinations that you can combine for a longer season of interest, though, in containers. This is another one that University of Pennsylvania has, or Penn State rather. it's part of their pollinator trial research. And the dates are up at the top. Again, it's too small to really read here, but you can, for a closer look, you can Google Penn State pollinator trial. So a few words about cultivars, nativars, and straight species. When in doubt, choose a straight species, and I'm going to define that. Achillea millefolium is common yarrow. It has the white flower, has the ferny type leaves at the basal leaves, makes a great turf substitute. But that's the straight species. But if you put something in single quotes after that, that's a cultivar. So Achillea millefolium paprika is a red cultivar. It looks the same in many ways. It may not be quite as robust, so there are differences, and it may make a big difference to pollinators and beneficial insects. So again, I'm going to say, when in doubt, choose a straight species. They can be a little bit hard to find sometimes, but certainly Ursanga and some of the vendors on the Plant Nova Natives website will steer you in the right direction for that. It is not possible, though, to overgeneralize and say that a cultivar is always poorer or always better than the straight species. For example, research at Penn State found that Symphyotrichum October skies, which is aromatic aster, a cultivar of aromatic aster, and it was substantially better at attracting pollinators than the straight species. Go figure. So you can't predict sometimes, but there's some excellent research that's been done, and I expect much more in the future. You can look at Penn State or Annie White's PhD dissertation from University of Vermont. Mount Cuba has some good information. Doug Tallamy has some good information for making wise choices on choosing native plants or choosing a cultivar or not, or a straight species. So let's define a few terms here. I need to move this down here. Okay. Is it a native species or a native cultivar? So a native species, straight species, is also called a wild genotype. And it's a plant that's developed hundreds or thousands of years in a particular ecosystem. Example of that is pictured, that light lavender and Monarda fistulosa. It's all over my front yard meadow, and it is a straight species. But the one on the right, which has a deeper color of purple, is Monarda fistulosa, and this is a cultivar called Claire Grace. And it's deliberately been crossbred or hybridized, sometimes for color, sometimes for flower shape, and sometimes for disease resistant. Claire Grace is more powdery mildew resistant, and Mount Cuba found that it didn't significantly alter the amount of pollinators and beneficial insects that visited it. So again, sometimes this is called a nativar or a native cultivar. So you'll hear both of those terms used. Let's see if I can make this. There we go. So here's some advantages and disadvantages. A native species, it's host to insects and birds. It provides cover, food, and perhaps habitat. It's well adapted to our local conditions. And if I was going to do a restoration project, I would use a straight native species. It supports biodiversity. Sometimes it's a little harder to find, but it may be a little more expensive because of that. Maybe wild or weedy looking. And certainly, yeah, if you went to Sam Droge's, you can just take that weed whacker and knock it back a little bit. It can be a little less predictable because it is more diverse genetically. But a native cultivar, on the other hand, may have a disease resistant, maybe a different color. Altering the color and the shape of the flower or the color of the leaves has been proven to be detrimental in some circumstances. So again, careful selection. It's more predictable, it's profitable, and that's why you see it at garden centers. It's hard to go to a garden center and see straight species anymore. So know what you're getting. Plant Nova Natives, we've been participating in, marking some native plants at local garden centers with native, and some of the cultivars, not hybrids, but cultivars are marked native species. It lacks genetic diversity. and it may be less adapted in terms of hardiness, and it may be less valuable to wildlife. Here's some more reading for your reading pleasure on nativars. Again, Penn State has some really good research, Mount Cuba, Doug Tallamy. So if you want to take that further and be an educated consumer, that's a good way to do it. So best practices for all containers. Okay, this goes for your tomatoes, although I'm not going to speak about any edibles here. It goes for any container garden. Okay, and I thought Matt put it all in perspective. Right plant, right place is just determining what conditions that plant is used to growing in. So if you have a sunny area, make sure you're putting a sun-loving plant. Clean the container well. I can't stress this enough. You might need to scrub it with steel wool or a wire brush to remove mineral deposits or other debris on it. And you might want to clean it with, a very dilute bleach water solution and let it air dry really well. The container must have adequate drainage holes. I look at so many containers at stores and I think, oh, that is really pretty. And then I look, it doesn't even have any drainage holes, or it has one drainage plug in the middle, and that's not adequate. So I'm going to probably say this 10 times, but you want something that is going to drain readily. So choose a container based on the plant needs too, and where you're putting it, and some design characteristics. A plant that's going to sit out in the sun probably is going to suffer in a black plastic non-porous planter because it's going to absorb that heat more. For the right plant, it might be okay. Now, this was something I'll repeat again. Don't use rocks or any filler at the bottom of the pot. No mailing popcorn, no milk jugs, no rocks. And this is going to be counterintuitive to what you've been taught in the past. But I'll tell you why in a few minutes. Container gardens have a finite amount of nutrients. So, native plants in our landscape do not need to be fertilized. That's one of the things we like about it. But a container garden, that plant is depending on you. It will use up the nutrients. It will use up the water in that closed environment of a container. So you're going to have to probably use some kind of conventional or organic fertilizer, and organic with a native plant would be my preference. And there's lots of good choices about that. You can ask at a garden center or, get used to really reading the labels. You want to bring your porous containers in the winter or they'll crack like a couple of mine did. Or you can take the plants out of the container because they really probably want to be in your landscape if you have any room. But if you don't have room, you can overwinter it. So water the soil, not the plant. You don't want to put water on the leaves or the flowers. That will fungus to grow on the leaves. So you want to keep the plant dry and water the soil. That's true for any container garden, tomatoes, peppers, whatever. So let's talk about soil. And we're going to spend a good amount of time on this because the plant is depending on this finite amount of soil. So garden soil with native plants can be used, but you have to make sure it has the right consistency and the right combination of ingredients. I'm going to recommend that you don't use peat. Peat is not renewable. Peat bogs were established in hundreds and thousands of years. And so we can't depend on peat. Several garden centers are investigating selling products that are peat free. So make sure you ask about that. More people are becoming aware of it. You can use, I'll offer a recipe in a little bit, but in general, you can use 1 part garden soil, some core, which is coconut fiber, some perlite, some coarse builder sand, but don't use fine beach sand or play sand. But again, there'll be a recipe in a little bit. Remember, garden soil may contain some weeds, seeds, or disease organisms or insects, but so you might need to monitor it. Again, avoid peat. This is the key. Whatever combination you use, make sure it drains well. Just plain old clay put in a pot will not drain well. It will be, it will look like the picture at the left there. The water will ball up on there, and clay is a very good, very tightly packed particles, and so it can repel water. Core can also repel water. So and some of the soilless mixes that you can get, if you don't wet them well initially, they will become hydrophobic, scared of water. So your plants, remember, are dependent on what you choose for soil. It needs to be light, fluffy. It has to have good aeration. You know, good soil is about 50% air, and we know that clay, it does not do that. So if you want to read more about this, the garden professors have some excellent articles on container planting. So just Google gardenprofessors.com container planting to get more information. So this is why we don't put rocks or anything else at the bottom. And again, you probably won't believe this, but this is what the research teaches. If you put any other filler at the bottom, you create a perched water table. Now we put rocks at the bottom and we think, okay, that water is going to drain into the rock area and then it's going to drain out. But that's not what actually happens. The water moves down, and when it hits a different surface, it stops moving and it collects above that rock layer. And that creates a perched water table. This is why in a planting hole for a tree, we don't put any other soil amendments in that hole for this very same reason. So what you don't want is water in the root zone, because that's not going to drain, and then the roots will can become diseased, rotten. You can read more about this and see some online demonstrations at gardenprofessors.com, container planting intuition versus reality. So peat-free potting soil. No peat. What am I going to use instead? So many mixes still contain peat. It's most important to see how any ingredients that you put together are going to allow the water to drain. There's lots of variety in products. There's compost and soil, bark ingredients over time, and different things react different ways in time and with different conditions. Perlite and builder sand are pretty stable though. So those are going to be your stable products, and bark ingredients and fresh and aged pine bark are going to be the ones that alter over time. So many ingredients are hydrophobic. You know, some you need to wet completely before you use them, or they'll never absorb water well if they get too dry. So remember, good soil has about 50% air. So in my preparation, I found that North Carolina State has a substrate laboratory, and they're looking at peat alternatives, and that you don't have to do the experiment just as is, but this just gives you an idea what they do in the substrate laboratory. They fill up these pots, they tap it 3 times, they hand irrigate it, and they make sure that it drains in 30 minutes. That's all you need to do. Okay, you don't have to do 10 pots, and you don't have to, weigh them, or you can use your observation skills to see whether your potting mix is doing what you want it to. This is from their laboratory too, and the one on the plant on the left, these are Gerbera daisies. They're not natives, but the one on the left shows a peat-free mix, good growth, good root development. The one on the right shows a peat and perlite mix. There's a lot more roots, but they're both adequate. They're both healthy plants. So they're doing some great research there. If you want to read more, it's in Greenhouse Magazine, and you can take a look at that. So here's a soil recipe I'm suggesting, but again, do your test. Make sure make sure you got the right ingredients, and and this is a peat-free mix. And core, remember, wet the core and don't let the core dry out. Mix it in with the other ingredients. These should all be mixed together like a cake. Okay, so This is some things that you see you want to read the label when you go to look at potting mix. There's some really good products out there and there's some really terrible ones. And I'm not allowed to promote a certain product, but again, we want to avoid peat. Coir can be substituted for peat, but it holds moisture and drains well if you wet it well. Don't use manure in containers. It tends to hold water too well, not to mention disease and stuff. So forest products, a lot of potting soils have cut up pallets and construction waste. So look at what product you're buying. Sometimes I'll put my nose down to it at the garden center and smell it because some of them smell really odd. Don't use biosolids. There's some products on the market that are a low nitrogen fertilizer, but they're not good for container gardens. They do repel deer, but I don't use them in my yard. Bark, pine wood or mulch is not very useful in a container unless you have a very, very large container that you need to keep weeds down, but probably not useful. Fungal inoculants, mycorrhizal, in my opinion, and from what I've read in various research, it's hard to find it active. So these are beneficial fungi that make root structures more advantageous, more diverse. The hyphae grow better and are able to absorb nutrients and water better. But many of the products available commercially are not even active. They might not even be alive. So probably think something to avoid. Fertilizer, you will need fertilizer in your closed system, organic or conventional, and I've used both, but I'm leaning toward organic fertilizer for native plants. Micronutrients, you usually don't need any. Lime, it probably already in the potting soil, but it usually won't tell you. But you can certainly do a soil test, but I think that's probably unnecessary if you do your own recipe. Volcanic rock, plants that like lean, dry soil, but most of our native plants are not in that category. Compost the quality and the nutrients varies widely, and it can be hydrophobic. I would avoid that. So do the smell test like I do. Put your nose down and smell. Some of them smell like ammonia, and that means there's excess nitrogen, or some soils I've even brought home without smelling smell like petroleum, and it makes you wonder what's in there. So let's talk a little bit about maintenance. Watering. So a lot of container gardens need watering it once a day or sometimes twice a day. A good rule of thumb in your garden or in a container is it drooping in the morning? Because most plants will absorb moisture during the night from the atmosphere. And if it's drooping in the morning, it probably really does need water. But if it's drooping in the afternoon, I mean, who isn't drooping in the afternoon? I am. But so check the soil. You can check the soil with your finger and keep an eye on it. These are not plants you can probably go off and leave forever or leave for a long vacation without somebody taking care of it. So choose the container also based on the water needs. Clay tends to be porous, and some plants like a drier root zone. So clay and ceramic would fill that bill most of the time. Remember, water the soil, not the plants. Keep the water off the leaves and allow to dry out between waterings, unless you have a plant that really likes water. And there are a couple in my list that do. The more roots, the more water. So pick a big enough pot so that it can grow as many roots as that picture I showed you from the substrate laboratory. New and newly planted probably needs closer monitoring, just like in the landscape. So for potting soil, we want the sweet spot. So the picture on the left shows, believe it or not, those leaves are showing that the conditions are too wet and that there is root rot. And so people will sometimes bring us in a rhododendron and it has those curled leaves, and it's not because of the cold, but because it has some a disease in the root system, maybe phytophthora or something that's affecting the uptake of it's affecting really the vascular system. So fast drain, these are super dry over here. And so if the soil pulls away from the sides of the pot, that potting soil is too compacted and dry. So you want a sweet spot of retaining water. A little bit more about soil moisture. So I want to draw your attention to wilting point. That's when the plants start to wilt a little bit, and you go, uh-oh, I need to water them. But when you get to the permanent wilting point, the vascular system has kind of shut down and there's no return to that. So you want to get to the plant before it gets to the permanent wilting point, because after that, it has no ability to get at the water. It's unavailable to it. Okay, so we're going to talk about, I'm going to show you some plant combinations, and this is where I want you to sit back and kind of just enjoy the pictures. It's going to be a lot of pictures of pretty plants, and it's result of many years of brainstorming what can go into a plant, for different conditions and what will work together. So if you see this big drop, that requires moist conditions. You see this full sun, 6+ hours. It may need irrigation twice a day. The summers we have there, if it's in the full sun, it might need you to closer monitor its water needs. This is for partial sun, less than 6 hours. There's some varieties for shade. Okay, so for fertilizing, that we're back in maintenance for a minute. Remember, there are options for fertilizer. There's dry. It's not very useful for containers. It's more of a lawn or garden product. Slow release are the little balls, and some potting mixes already have these in it. But it does take water to release those, because that's a coating on the outside of the fertilizer particles. And so you need to water any of these in really well. You may need to fertilize every other week or once a month. So read the label on what you're using and watch your plant and monitor it accordingly. But they all have N, P, or K, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So a 10-5-5 fertilizer is roughly 10% nitrogen, 5% phosphorus, and 5% potassium. A 3-1-2 can be used, or a similar ratio. So just follow the recommendations on the fertilizer. And I tend to like the liquid water soluble, because I can see exactly what it's getting, and I know it's going to get it, and I know when it's going to get it. But water any of these in well. So choosing a container, this is kind of a fun part. You get better root growth on a larger container, but don't make it too large. It can be too big. I've been guilty of that. So if you're going to pot them up put it in its final destination rather than transplanting 3 or 4 times if you can. But make sure that it's not too big and it's getting the water and nutrients necessary. A larger root zone can support more roots, and that makes the above ground growth better. You can read more about correct pot size at Garden Myths. So here's some types of containers. I've always wanted one of these troughs. I probably have to get one of those this year. It's pretty cool. And there are these bags. We've used these at school gardens for both ornamentals, natives, edibles. And of course, this is really cute. I had to put that picture in. But you can get, ceramic, clay, plastic. And again, you want ceramic or clay if you don't mind a porous material that's going to keep the roots well aerated. Here's some fun, creative ideas. There's so many great websites with creative ideas. This is one I've tried, except for mine aren't pipes. I use old drain tiles. So then I stood them on the end and then I sunk them in the soil, and that's been fun to put. I have the native allium in there. But there's so many great ideas online that you can, many more than this. So enjoy looking at that and dreaming about spring. So for placement, the reason I put these are not native plants in this particular garden, and you might not even like this design here, but this is to talk about microclimate. So these plants here are going to get a great deal of radiated heat, a lot of sun, probably. So, think about what's around where you have placed the pots and make sure that it's getting what it needs as far as sun exposure and not too much heat. So planting, you can take the plant. If you're going to buy a plant rather than seeds or anything, you take it from its container. This is for any plant, really. Inspect the roots, make sure they smell okay, make sure they're white and healthy looking. They shouldn't be dark and slimy. You shouldn't be able to pull a sheath off of the roots. That shows disease. Select a container with the drain holes and add the medium that you want, and make sure it has some kind of slow release fertilizer when you first plant it, and water it in well. Okay, let's talk about design for a few minutes. And I'm not a great designer, but I think I can give you some tips here. Think about location. Do you want a mixture or a single species? What colors? I'm a real color person, but what height, weight, what material for the container? Do you want it to be formal or can it be pretty free and easy? And then the old fill, thrill, spill. So you probably, if you've been around gardening for any amount of time, that little moniker there. So let's talk about thrill, fill, spill in case you don't know about it. So a thrill would be putting something in the center that really catches your attention. Might be a native grass. It might be some bright Turk's cap lily. And then you have fill, and fill gives you the base of the planter. And then you have something spilling over the side. But you know what? You don't have to make your container with this technique. You can do whatever you like. And that's the beauty of it. You can have creativity, but this is just one technique that you can try to use. Okay, so let's talk about colors. So these are analogous colors. They're warm, they're bright, they're cheery. And this combination is Aquilegia canadensis, which is columbine, Packer aurea, and Zizia aurea. And these can take partial sun, all three of these. But it is a warm combination. And, sometimes we're drawn to that warm color, and sometimes we're drawn to cool colors. These are analogous cool colors. And here's Penstemon digitalis with the white flower and little purple nectar guides with Iris cristata. And there's the Dicentra exemia, which is the bleeding heart, the native bleeding heart, and Geranium maculatum. So this would be a nice spring into summer type of analogous cool color combination. But remember, complementary colors are opposite each other on the color wheel. And sometimes that's really fun because it's eye-popping when you combine these colors, the blue and the yellow and the purple and the green and the orange and the green, blue-green. So this is blue-eyed grass, and I'm going to try to say this. This is Sisyrinchium. How's that? I practiced that one, and because I only knew how it was spelled, I didn't know how to say it. And Zizio. Those are a dynamic complementary color, and these two bloom about the same time, so you could combine these two. Here's that Lilium superbum, that Turk's cap lily, and you could put that as your thriller and put Carex pennsylvanica, a nice filler at the bottom, and have complementary colors. That would be a very simple summer, and this is a part sun combination. So let's talk about full sun, because spring is coming pretty soon, and we need to start dreaming about what we can put out there. So here's a combination. This is Achillea millefolium, Zizia aurea, and Sisycrium, Syringium, sorry, Angustifolium. So let's look at those. There's the leaves of the yarrow. There's the flowers of the yarrow, the achillea. And there's the Syringium, the blue-eyed grass, and the zizia, which makes it kind of a nice early spring. And this is full sun combination. Zizia can handle a little partial sun too. Here's another combination, Aquilegia canadensis, or the native columbine, Iris cristata, and Carex pennsylvanica with the flower head showing. Here's another combination for you, Penstemon digitalis. Oops, this is Pachyra aurea. This is Pachyra aurea buds, which are purple, very cool. And this is Penstemon digitalis, or beard tongue. And this is Fragaria virginiana, the native strawberry, which would be a really nice partial sun combination. Let's look at another spring combination. Tiarella, which is foam flower. There's Achillea again, that yarrow, I like yarrow. And Phlox viricata. This would be a more of a shady woodland type area. And so it certainly would like soil that was higher in loam content, probably.
Hey, Nancy, we have 10 minutes left until the Q&A.
Uh-oh, I better hurry up. Okay, let's look at full sun early summer, Spigelia and Aquilegia and Carex and Coreopsis. This would make a nice hot complementary color. Camacrystium, which is partridge pea, and Rudbeckia, Asclepias tuberosa, the butterfly weed. Just sit back and enjoy this because I'm going to go through it fast. Liatris spicata. This is a great complementary color combination for summer. Again, Achillea and sneezeweed, and a grass for a thriller in the middle. I think these look great together. Here's Helianthus augustifolium, and this is called Lowdown, and it's designed by Thomas Grenier at the U.S. Botanic Gardens. And this Muhlenbergia, which is pink muley grass, tends to be a little disappointing until it blooms. I mean, it looks really kind of drab and kind of lays there, but when it blooms, it looks great. But if you put it with the Helianthus looks, gives you the spark. And then when the Muhlenbergia comes out, they blend nicely together. I thought that was a brilliant combination. Here's another full sun for summer with the Muhlenbergia again. These are all full sun, Achillea and Rudbeckia. Another combination with that Echinacea, Coreopsis verticillata, and Asclepias tuberosa. Here's another combination with a shrub, this time Calicarpa americana, the beautyberry. And you put the carex at the bottom, the sedges at the bottom, and put some Coreopsis verticillata around for the filling the container. This does like a little bit more moisture on especially for the carex. This is a shrub, Ceonanthus, and it's New Jersey tea. And this likes partial sun, this combination. Coreopsis can take a little more sun. But this would be a shrub with the base layer of the carex and the Coreopsis filling the container. So full sun late summer for pollinators, we want to make sure that we have that. Here's sneezeweed. It doesn't make you sneeze. It was used for snuff. Here's solidago. You definitely need that in your landscape to attract all those pollinators. And here's the Symphenotrichum October skies, which is a beautiful fall aster. And I love that combination. This is a tia, or sweet spire. And this is the fall color on the right and blooming on the left lower. And then you could put the carex at the base of the plant. And I would go with for this, I would go with a smaller cultivar. Little Henry works pretty good with that. Here's a mountain mint and the Veronicastrum, and then a Liatris, and that would be a late summer, providing pollen and nectar sources for pollinators. Rudbeckia, there's that Muhlenbergia again, and Echinacea. Here's another mountain mint, the Muticum, and that works beautifully in the fall for a nectar source for monarchs, particularly with the aster, the New England aster this time. Here's a few more: Phlox vericata, the bleeding heart, Iris cristata, Tirarella, penstem, and then a Geranium maculatum if you have a very big container. You can do some shade things with Packer aria and the maidenhair fern. Here's that heuchera that Sam Droege was talking about, and you put it with Iris Coreopsis verticillata. And then this is the hay-scented fern on the bottom left. Here's Chrysogenum virginicum. That's the green and gold with a marginal shield fern, and I forget what the other one is. So this is a nice wet shade combination. You got ostrich fern and Impatiens capensis, which is jewelweed, but it does like wet. And those ostrich ferns can do some protection against deer who like to eat the Impatiens. Here's a staghorn sumac, fall color, fruit bearing. This is not poison sumac. And then put the carex at the base of it. This is partial sun. Conolestium, Conoclinium coelestium, the blue mistflower. This is a great combination in a wet area, part shade, with the Lobelia sylvatica and some carex at the bottom. Eragrostis, purple lovegrass plus turtlehead would make a nice combination. And that does like wet. Carex blanda and Sedum ternatum are a nice combination for shade. It's a native sedum that grows in the shade. And some vines, you can include those passion flower and the native clematis, or Virginia creeper on it, and you could put a trellis in there, or Laniceris sempervirens on a trellis. Here's some trellis ideas. I happen to like that rusted metal kind. I think I'll have to get one of those. But you can do single species. And I would move any shrubs back into the landscape because they're going to be much happier there in the long run. But a small deciduous tree like witch hazel in a moist, partial sun environment could be lovely in a container. And Calicarpa americana, again, the American beauty berry. Yucca could be a single species plant in there, and it's pollinated at night by moths, blooms in June and July. This is something I've always wanted to try. These are horsetails, Equestium. They're 2 to 4 feet tall. I think it would make a wonderful screen. It likes very wet soil that's well drained, can handle a little bit of shade. Here's a Tia virginica, that little Henry, again, for a single species in a pot. Or button bush. I would move the button bush back into your landscape after you've enjoyed it in a container. Sugar shack is a smaller 3 to 4 feet high cultivar that might be better for a container. And here's some lists for early spring. I'll be glad to show these after when we're taking questions, but some other combinations you might consider. And some early spring, summer for part sun. And for winter interest, you can always do a corylus, which is American hazelnut, or red twig dogwood in a pot. Ilex verticillata, beautiful flowers for pollinators. And then there's the berries on the bare branches. So we offer through the extension office, our master gardeners, our Audubon ambassadors, and we have had master gardeners who live in apartments and have had balcony gardens with containers, and they have been certified because they've had that many visitors to their balcony garden. So that's really cool. So it is possible. It doesn't matter where you live. You can contribute to the ecosystem with a container garden with native plants. Here's the sanctuary species. And you can contact us for questions about this presentation or questions about the Audubon program or any insect questions that you have. We're on social media. So join our Facebook page, VCE Prince William Master Gardeners, lots of good stuff on there. And there's resources at the end here. So, whew. I know that was fast. I apologize, but when she says you
Yeah.
have 10 minutes, you got to finish, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Nancy. I'm sorry to make you rush through it.
No, no, no. It's okay.
Yeah, cool. I know we started late, so
Yeah.
but yeah, thank you so much. We'll get to the questions. So our first one, where are we? Noreen asked, a cultivar might attract insects, but is the bloom time different, out of
Mhm.
step with the emergence of insects, or is the
Mhm.
composition of its nectar different?
Yeah, I talked about that in the it can be any of those things. Sometimes it's very unpredictable. Some research at Mount Cuba looked at the Symphenotrichum October skies, and it's an aster, it's the aromatic aster. And actually, the cultivar attracted many more insects and more diversity at their research than the straight species. But in general, the straight species is going to be more in sync with when the emergence of the pollinators, beneficial insects would occur. And there's some evidence to show that it's more nutritious and more available. And again, a lot of cultivars are sterile, or the flower head has been changed so much, or the leaf color has been changed, that they're not even acceptable. So, be a wise consumer and take a look at Mount Cuba's data, or Penn State has pollinator trials. More and more people are looking into this. And there has been some University of Vermont research too that was very good.
Okay, that's interesting. Deborah asks, what is your feeling about the use of carbon char?
Yeah, and probably not. In general, I would say no, not in a container. I think there's the jury's still out as far as in the landscape, but I wouldn't put it in a container.
Okay. And Noreen asked, what do you think of putting a handful of dried leaves in the bottom of the pot?
Well, you're still going to have an interface between two mediums, and that's going to collect water. It just doesn't make sense to our brains that that's what happens, but believe me, that's what happens. You get a perch water table if you have any mismatch. That's why your soil needs to be mixed together well. So no, I would say no.
Okay, so no dried leaves in the bottom of the pot. Okay, and Marnie Bruce asked about the only fertilizer I use is worm castings mixed in water from my own worms. Is that okay for container gardening?
Yeah, sure. You're going to get, it's hard to predict what nutrients you're getting though from that, because there's no analysis going on, with fertilizers that you buy. They'll say on the label what the NPK percentages are. So, you can certainly try it. And if you see symptoms in your plant, go back and try something else. That native plants are pretty forgiving. So I say you could try it, but it's an unknown what you're getting.
Mhm. Okay. And Deborah asked, what is your opinion of starting with seeds versus plants?
Yeah, I do a lot of seeds. Partridge pea is a great native plant to start with seeds, and it fixes its own nitrogen in the pot. So I think that's fine. And winter sowing is a great way to get started. There's a great Facebook page on winter sowing, and Penn State has a fact sheet on it. I just watered mine during the break time out there, and the snow is going to come on, and that will help them germinate too. So it's a good idea.
Mhm. Okay. Cher asked, any thoughts on using fabric planters like tomato bags as planters for native plants?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I have some, and they are, porous, so they might need more uh, monitoring for water use.
Mhm. Okay. And Susan says, I don't understand the perched water table argument against fillers at bottom of the pot.
Yeah, yeah. If you, I would suggest that you read that blog, and there are some YouTube videos on it. It's kind of one of those things you have to accept on faith that that's what's occurring, because it doesn't make sense to my brain, but the research shows that you get that perched water table because of the mismatch of any two materials, and that the water collects right at that root zone, which is a problem.
So related to that question, Pat asked, how about a coffee filter in the bottom of a pot?
To keep the dirt from falling out. Okay.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And Kay asked, do you have any advice for container growing milkweeds?
Oh yeah. Common milkweed will grow anywhere. I've grown the Asclepias tuberosa, the native butterfly weed successfully, and that's included in some of my plant combinations. So yeah, common milkweed will grow anywhere. I have not had super success with the purple milkweed, the incarnata, but I don't see why not, as long as it was kept moist enough.
Okay. And Mark asks, any recommendations for hanging pots?
Oh gosh, Mark, that's a great question. Why didn't I think of that? Oh,
My experience, they dry out very quickly.
they do, and birds nest in mine all the time. I had to stop doing that. I can't think of, I'm sure there's, what if you put something like a vine in one of those? I mean, like Virginia creeper would be pretty, or Lonicera sempervirens. You could, I don't know. That's a good question, Mark. You stumped me. Anybody? Anybody have any suggestions for Mark?
Dale in the chat said scabious. I think he was referring to the hanging pot recommendation.
It's scabiosa.
Oh, scabiosa. Yeah, that's not a native, but it's nice. I mean, I have some.
Okay. And then Mark did ask, how often should you repot plants, especially if you have a shrub like a blueberry in a large pot?
Yeah, and that's going to need, nutrients and the right soil. They like acidic soil. If the pots are around the edges, and really dense around the edges, I mean, take a look at, how the root zone is growing. I would put it in a bigger pot at that point.
So Elaine asked, what do you use as organic fertilizer?
I don't think I'm allowed to say that. I use a fish emulsion stuff.
Okay, fish emulsion.
I don't have to give you I can't give you the name. I don't even know the name.
Okay, that's fair. And Lynn had asked, who at the beginning of the presentation, who did you say were good to ask questions of? I think you were talking about the Audubon ambassadors.
Is that what I was doing? Lynn, is that what you wanted? I'll go to the Audubon page.
Okay.
Yeah, you said something like the professors or the ambassadors.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, so this is the Audubon program. Master gardeners go to your home and help you to develop we're not there to judge your plants. We're there to help you develop a habitat. But the Garden Professors blog online is from the University of Washington. And you can read more about the perched water table, about, picking a container size. There's some, she's a stickler for research, peer-reviewed research. So you won't find anything that's not solid on there. She's very argumentative, but it's good information.
Okay.
Check it out.
So this session will close at 2:05, so we could hang out until then, and I'll try and get through all the questions. Jerry asked, if you have a perennial in a container, do you have to change or add soil each year?
Can you say that one more time?
If you have a perennial in a container, do you have to change or add soil each year?
If it needs to be repotted, yes, but you would need, I would look at look at the root zone, as if it's curling all around the inside of the pot. It probably needs a bigger pot, and it will always need extra nutrients because remember, it's a finite system and it's using up what's in the soil that you've provided.
Okay. And can you repeat the overwintering advice?
Oh, winter sowing. You can
The
Google.
overwintering, sorry.
Oh,
So I think
oh,
at the
yeah.
beginning,
Okay. So if it's a clay or ceramic pot, you want to keep it out of the, out of the freeze and thaw cycle. So I put mine in a warm spot in my garage, and I make sure I water it during the winter, but I know that it's not going to freeze and crack the ceramic. Or I take the plant out, put it in my landscape in the fall.
Mhm. Okay. So Teresa is asking about growing sweet potato in hanging containers because rabbits mow them down in the vegetable garden. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, vegetables. You're going to ask me about vegetables? Um, you can certainly grow them in a container. But I've had rabbits climb up in containers too.
In a hanging pot?
Yeah. I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah. Sacrifice crops, plant something for the rabbits to eat around it, I guess.
They'll just eat everything.
Okay.
They're cute though.
Yeah. And there were a couple of other questions about, let's see, how deep a container needs to be. So where can you learn about how deep a container needs to be?
Okay, so look at the plant that you purchase and look at how big the root zone is. Take it out of its pot, and you want plenty of room for it to grow on either side of it. Okay, and when you water it, you want to make sure that all the water doesn't just drain through, so the soil has to be right too. I would gauge it by the size of what the root zone is, and then go somewhat larger.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of eyeballing it.
Right. And then I think it's the last one. I apologize if I missed any. After several seasons, should we completely replace the soil in small and large container gardens? If not, how do we best augment that? And when is best to add our well-composted materials to garden/containers? So I think you might have answered part of that.
Yeah. I wouldn't replace it completely, especially with a native plant. And if you use good soil mix, I mean, you could certainly put it in another container and add more soil to a new container.
Mm-hmm. And then, and when is it best to add any composted materials? So I think you mentioned not using compost.
Yeah, I would avoid that. What you don't want in a container that you do want in a landscape is you don't want water holding capacity in a container. You want it to drain.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think I got all the questions. Did I miss anything?
I'm looking here. Let me stop sharing. Consider outdoor campaign. Sure, and that, yeah, I think you could. Certainly different plants. I moved some of mine inside.
Okay. So I'm putting in your email address in the chat box again for anyone who has any follow-up questions.
I hope you all have fun with this. Don't sweat it. Okay. You guys know a lot already. I know this audience, so just have fun and enjoy spring.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. So we'll be sending the recordings of all the sessions to everybody who registered. So thank you all again so much for joining. And if you all are interested in the group Q&A, we're going to have the other presenters meet in the main room for about 30 minutes. And the slides will not be available. I won't be able to send that out. I think that's if the presenters want to share any slides, you could email them. So we could send you their contact information and the recorded sessions.
Yeah. Okay, enjoy your day.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Nancy. So we'll be all the sessions. So we recorded, I think that was 12 total. Don't quote me on that. So the keynote speaker, Matt's, and then the other sessions. So yes, thank you, everyone. Hope you all have a good day. Bye.
Good job, Jess.
Thank you. You too. Okay, and I think the breakout room will close now.
All right, so welcome back to the Q&A. Jess or Nancy, I don't remember who we said was going to host this one. I will just point out that in order to leave landscaping breakout open, everyone else has to be moved back into the main session manually if they have not done so themselves.
Thanks, Rob. So we're just going to give landscaping folks another minute or so.
Kristen and Valerie asked for it to be left open until 2:30. I guess they're taking direct questions.
Okay. So I think we had Matt said that he was going to be here for the group Q&A, so we could get that started whenever everyone's ready. I don't know. Oh, we still have to move the people from the other breakout rooms.
Yes.
That's the problem. Okay.
That's the problem.
Okay, well, we could send a message to everybody.
Yeah. Julie, in order to leave landscaping design open, everyone else has to choose to leave their breakout room to return to the main session, or I have to manually move them. So I'm working on both of those things. I don't know, do we know if Matt Bright is here? Oh, there he is. Right, so welcome back. I think we can, as soon as Matt gets back. There he is.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you.
I think we could go ahead and get started with the Q&A. I don't remember, Julie, who the moderator of that was going to be. I nominate you.